So welcome back to my channel. I'm just going to set that down real quick right there. So for the project today, what we're going to do is make a Pinafore apron. This is actually going to be for a girl that I work with. She asked for an apron that she can use when they are painting, and the style that I'm going to make is in the Pinafore style, where it goes up and over and it kind of crisscrosses in the back. But what I need to do first is actually serge the edges and wash the fabric, because with it being 100% cotton, that will shrink. Okay, so just curious, does anybody ever try to work on stuff and then you get interrupted because of the most adorable little thing? I hope it's not just me, but look how cute he is. Look at the cute boy. Say hi, Bentley. Say hi, baby. I'm in Mommy's workspace and she can't do anything, but that's okay. Come here. Casey, a good boy. Yeah. Casey, a good boy. Oh, big stretches. We'll get back to sewing soonish, maybe. For the apron pieces, we need 2 straps, 2 pockets, a facing, and the body of the apron. To find the size you need to measure above your bust and add 5 inches to allow for ease over the shoulders. You will need to also decide the length of your apron. I went with 28 inches long for this apron, 25 for the actual length, and then 3 inches for seam allowance on the top and bottom hems. The pocket should measure 8 by 11 inches. The facing needs to measure the length of your apron by 5 inches, and the straps need to measure 20 by 7 inches. And in just about 3 seconds, you're going to see the moment I realized I messed up when I was cutting. I knew the sizes that I needed, but I had 28 inches on my brain and definitely cut the apron too short lengthwise. I did have enough fabric, though, to fix my mistake, as I mentally calculated, and I just ended up using this piece I'm cutting right now to just cut out the straps and pockets in just a moment. After all that was corrected, I took the pieces to the ironing board to press as many of them as possible for this point in time. I will have to go back and press later for other steps, but this way I was able to tackle a lot more. Right now, I just folded the straps in half lengthwise and pressed them. The facing should be turned under a 1/2 inch on one of the longer sides, and just pressed all the way across that way with a 1/2 inch hem seam there. The pockets, when we get to those, they should be turned over a 1/2 inch on the shorter side. They will then be turned over and pulled back down another 1.5 inches for each of the pockets. We're going to press that another time here. Our bottom hem of the apron should be turned under a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to go ahead and turn it in another 2 inches and press it all the way across. After that, we need to pin the straps and the bottom hem so we can sew them in place. At one point, a pin tried to pick a fight with me, but in a second, I think I really showed it who was really in charge. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and end of each of your pieces here. To save on thread and also on time, I didn't pull all of my pieces off after each one. I just chain stitched them all together, or chain pieced them. And basically by doing this, I just sewed down each of my seam allowances there. And then instead of taking everything off, I just scooted them along and added the next piece in, sewed right on down, and ended up cutting everything afterward. After I backstitch, we are done at this moment. I lift my presser foot and take out the needle and trim my threads. Good to go. So we're just going to go back to the ironing board after this. We do have to turn our straps right side out, and we're just going to give them a nice little press to take out any of the wrinkles that we had when we turned it out. We can also take this moment to press down our side seams of our apron. And by doing this, we're going to press them down a 1/2 inch twice, but we're not going to sew the side seams yet. We're going to press them now so we have our memory presses or our lines to follow to enclose our raw edges in a later step. But for now, we're going to work with the entire width of the apron body, so we have to just press them down. After pressing the side seams, we need to make sure to open them back up and lay the fabric out right side up. This next part can be a little confusing because we're going to have to add some pins and to mark some places. We're going to put a pin in the very center of the top part of the apron. Then we're going to make the pin the center of a 7-inch line. This means we're going to place pins on both sides of that center pin, and we're going to do that by putting one on either side 3.5 inches away from the center to make it have a total of 7 inches. After we've done this part, we can place our straps as well. We're going to place our straps at the top 1 inch from the outside of the apron. This should be lined up against the side seams just that we just pressed a moment ago. We're going to use the pins to hold the straps in place. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the other end of the strap and we're going to bring it up to the opposite side of the outside pins. So keeping the center pin in mind, we'll take that left strap over to the outside of the right pin and the right strap to the outside of the left pin and pin everything down in place. After these are placed, you may want to take a moment to try on your apron to make sure the straps are where or how you want them to be. Since this was not an apron for me, I wasn't able to do this, but I'm sure it'll turn out just fine. If you decided your straps are where you want them or how you want them to be, we can now base the straps down. To base the straps, you don't have to backstitch at the beginning or the end of your stitching. We just need to base them in place with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Out of habit, or just to torture myself later, I'm not sure yet, I did backstitch each part of the straps and I used a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which did come back to bite me later because I did have to pick out some stitches after I sewed, had sewn, did sew. Why don't any of these sound right? After I sewed the facing in place. Once the straps are basted, we're going to trek back over to the ironing board to pin the raw edges of the facing to the top of the apron, right sides together. I actually think pinning this in place literally took more time than sewing it in place. Make sure your straps, when you are pinning, not your straps, make sure your facing when you're pinning that the side seams are open so you can pin the facing completely even from side to side. And we also need to make sure that the folded or pressed edge is on the bottom facing up. This should be the case if we put the pieces right sides together. Now when we go back to the sewing machine, this time we are going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You might have to slow down just a little bit as you sew over the straps of your apron. Sometimes it can get a little bit bulky and you can chance breaking a needle. This time though, that was not an issue. We are back at the ironing board again, but real quick I moved the board so we can trim our seam allowance down to 1/4 inch. We then just need to press one more time. We need to press the seam allowance to the top of the apron and then turn the facing under to be pressed down. When we do this, we need to take care to remember that the folded edge, that the facing that we did forever ago, is still pressed flat when the facing is turned. Since we pressed it and then turned the facing, the raw edges of the facing will be enclosed. And I didn't show this on camera. I wasn't rolling apparently, but all I did afterward was just pin the facing down to the body of the apron to hold it in place so I was able to stitch it on the sewing machine. Then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and top stitch that facing as close to the edge as possible where we pressed it down. We can take the opportunity after this to sew our side seams of our apron. Ready to sew the side seams of the apron? You'd think you are, but no. As I got ready to sew that, I ran out of bobbin thread, so then I had to go and reload the bobbin. This is thrilling. Okay, now we can go back and hem the side seams of our apron. All I did earlier was use the two folded under ½ inch edges that I did previously, just as lines and guides to follow along. I did pin them down to hold them in place to make it a little easier for me. And after I was done with that, backstitch, lift the presser foot and needle, and the body of the apron is now complete. Yay! The last thing we need to do is add on pockets. We're going to take the pocket top we pressed down earlier and sew down one of the sides, sew down the side of the pocket top with a ½ inch seam. After this, we can clip the corners to get rid of some of the bulkiness. We then turn the pocket top out and it creates a nice double fold line. I'm going to push the corners out to give our pocket a sharper edge and sew down the edge of our pocket top with a top stitch. I did also forget about needing to iron here. I did have to go back, and after press down the pockets, it did need to be folded under a ½ inch on the sides and the bottom to create a nice flat edge. After I did that, it was time to sew the pockets on. Well, pin the pockets on. To decide where I needed to pin them, it fits differently on every apron. For this apron, I used a placement of 4½ inches from the bottom and 9½ inches from the side. It's a little bit more challenging since this apron wasn't for me, but if you're not sure, you should put the apron on to give yourself an idea on where you want the pocket placement to be. If you mess up, then just go back and pin it back until you have it exactly where you need to be. To sew the pockets on, I did a few extra back stitches at the tops and bottom corners just to make them a little more secure, since pockets are pretty heavy traffic when they're used a lot. I stitched as close to the edge as possible, and when I made it to a corner, all I did was lift my presser foot while keeping my needle down and just turn my apron. I did this until I made it all the way back to the top of the other side of the pocket, and when both pockets were attached, the apron was complete. So that was the apron. I realized in the process of editing this video that I did not make an outro of some sort, and the finished final product looked very grainy. I'm not sure why. I have a brand new camera that I've been trying to work with this on, and it's just really grainy. But it is a crossback apron, as you can see. The straps are right here, and it just goes on open over the head through the armholes right here, and it has two pockets on the front. I'm really hoping that the girl I made this for really gets some good use out of it. It's super soft, it's super comfy, and I'm really hoping that you can hear me okay. I'm not wearing my mic because that leads to a whole other set of issues. As I was also editing, I found out that Loki, the cat, had a nice little snack on my little microphone cable. So I happened to use the audio capabilities on the camera, and hopefully it works out I do have plans to go ahead and get a new mic, but we'll see what happens. I'm just... Oh, there's another spot. He really went to town on this mic here. But he's my baby. Anyways, I really hope that this apron gets some good use. They're super cute, and now you're able to sew along with me and make one of your own. I really hope that you enjoy it. Okay, bye. See you in the next one.